Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
All righty, let's go ahead and share my screen.
Great.
Looks like it's sharing okay.
Yes, it is. Thank you.
Perfect. Excellent.
And just like last time, everyone, if you would just keep yourself on mute during the presentation and post your questions into chat, that would be great. And we'll keep an eye on your questions there. Sorry, I keep wanting to say Patrick. David.
Everyone does that.
Everyone does. David, are you okay if I record this session?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you very much. All right, so this is being recorded, everyone, and I'll let you take it over. Thank you.
Great. Thanks. Again, welcome everyone. This is my talk, Intro to Intro to Dataflex. No, wait, not that. Okay. Intro to Dataverse inside of inside of Power Automate. Now, I'm kidding, of course. It's Intro to Dataverse inside of Power Automate. It's just I like to make fun of Microsoft for their multiple name changes. It used to be CDS, then for a hot second it was Dataflex Pro, and Microsoft Flow changed to Power Automate, and you know, it's just. I see someone already LOL'd at that. Yeah, it's actually practical. I mentioned why I kind of call this out because as we go through some of the documentation online, you'll still find references to some of the old materials. So it's important you kind of understand the history and know when to look for sort of the older names. So again, my name is Dave Patrick. I work for a company called Data Systems Analyst, otherwise known as DSA Inc. Been around since 1963. We're DoD contractors over here. I'm located on the East Coast in Maryland, but we're all over the United States. We've got jobs up and down the East Coast, through Texas, California. We even I'm looking for Java developers in Hawaii. So if anyone's interested in that, I keep trying to get sent out there myself. I tell them I know JavaScript, and apparently that script part gets me denied every time. So it's been a great. I've been working for them for almost 10 years now. I thought I'd be there 6 months, but it's really been a blast. So I'll put up a link at the end if anyone's looking for a job. You know, please check us out. Thanks to our sponsors. So without their support, we wouldn't be able to do this. We really appreciate everyone: VMware, WhereScape, DBWatch, O'Reilly, Lucient, DataVale, SIOS, Cappuccino, Insurance Agency, and Redgate. They really come through and help make these possible. So what are the takeaways from today's talk? Really 4 main takeaways. One is I want you to understand what is Dataverse. How do you use it? Specifically, I like to, how to use it. Well, let's take a specific scenario. We'll talk about how we can use it with a flow inside of Power Automate. So I'll take the scenario where someone might be using Dynamics CRM. They might be entering new accounts, and you want someone in SharePoint who maybe doesn't have access to Dynamics CRM, Customer Relationship Management, for those of you who aren't aware of the Dynamics CRM applications. But maybe someone who doesn't have a license or doesn't have access to it, who's just sitting in SharePoint, might want to know how to access that or see changes like a new account showing up. We can use Flow in Power Automate to make that available. And I'm just going to go over here and do let's see, I saw someone come off of mute, but I don't think they meant to. I hate when I'm off mute and then I say something like, and then someone goes, oh, hey, you're off mute. So it's worse to be off mute when you think you're on versus the other way around, right? So looks like we're good now. Okay, so takeaways. What is Dataverse? How do I use it using specifically a Flow in Power Automate? And if you're using Power BI, how do you get to it inside of Power BI? So those are the 4 things I'm hoping you'll walk away from this talk with. So we'll start off as what is Dataverse, and as I mentioned, it used to be called the Common Data Service. So and then for a hot second, it was called Microsoft Dataflex Pro, but there was a copyright issue with that. So we being Microsoft, quickly changed the name to Dataverse, and now everything's Dataverse. So if you actually go out to that link there, you'll go out and you'll find out all about what Dataverse is. And I do use the Microsoft Learn website. It's a great resource for information. I'll talk a little bit about that more in a minute. Where does Dataverse lie? So in describing what it is, we want to talk about how it's part of the bigger picture, Microsoft's Power Platform. So the low-code platform, it's not just Office 365, but also Azure, Dynamics 365, your own custom standalone programs. It's all that, reporting with Power BI, your app development with Power Apps, workflow development with Power Automate. There's this new thing called Power Virtual Agents that you can use. There's AI Builder, just hundreds of data connectors to get to different data. And then Dataverse. Dataverse is this database in the cloud that's very easy to manage because it's centrally located with a browser, and we're going to show you how easy it is. So One of the resources I use, as I mentioned, Microsoft Learn, just a ton of material. It's not just documentation in the cloud. It's so much more than that. There's certification prep, hands-on labs, sandboxes that you can activate to make use of Azure credentials without having to have use your own credits. This particular article is a quick 7-minute read that talks about what is Microsoft Dataverse, gives you that breakdown. It says, this is sort of my elevator pitch to my CIOs and CEOs. As I work as a DoD contractor, I'm constantly talking to different generals and, well, not generals mainly, it's colonels and other, managers. And they're like, Dave, tell me, give me, they call it the bluff. Give me the bottom line up front. And I say, Dataverse, it's a cloud database, easy to manage, easy to secure. Bam. And that's what this is telling us. It's a bunch of tables and rows. We used to call that, it used to be called entities and attributes, but we try to simplify it more layman's terms. So now it's tables and rows. In the cloud, things like name, standard tables like accounts, customers, addresses, all are made available to you out of the box. So real quick shout out to Microsoft Learn. Again, resources for becoming certified. Learn TV is a newish thing. I was on an episode of that, which was kind of neat. You can just kind of watch that 24 hours a day. Learn a bunch of different learning paths, which are similar to college courses that you can take. If you go out there and you click on the certifications, you can see, I saw there was a question in the beginning when we were all hanging out before we started the talks, and someone asked about, what about the old certifications? And I'm a big certification junkie. I've got MSSD, MSSE, NCT. I've taken, I feel like I've taken all the tests. And now they've got this new role-based certification that Microsoft has rolled out. Well, Microsoft Learn is your one-stop resource for free online training, hands-on labs. As I mentioned, you can click, I want to be a developer, I want to be a data engineer. And as you go into each one of these, you'll see that there's different modules, and each module has different units. And this particular unit, I pulled out just one example to show you that you can basically sign in to activate a sandbox that'll give you time in Azure that doesn't charge you anything. You might have 4 hours, you might have 8 hours to give you enough time to do whatever particular hands-on lab you're working on. So just a fabulous resource to learn some of this stuff using Microsoft Learn. So back to what is Dataverse. So we looked at that article from Microsoft Learn that kind of talked about it being this database in the cloud, but this is what it looks like. So if you actually go out there to flow.microsoft.com and you click on data in the left-hand side, or there's a couple different ways to get to it, right? You could also go out to, I said Flow, but you can also go out to Power Apps and click on data. So Flow, Power Apps, they're all integrated. You'll see as we go to one and then click on data, it sort of switch seamlessly to another. So when you click on that data, this is an old screenshot, and I left this here on purpose so you can see that it used to be called entities and things like option sets. So they're changed now. Now it's tables and choices and things like that in more layman terms. But you have those standard tables, right? The account, the address, customer, things like that. You can also have your own custom entities or custom tables. You can, one of my students, I teach at the University of Maryland, and one of my students, went in there and created like a pet entity to keep track of different people's pets. Another one created one for cars, and whatever entities or tables that you need to keep track of, you can create your own custom ones as well as use the standard ones that come with Dataverse. If you're in Power BI and you're trying to look at data that's already out there in Dataverse, maybe from Dynamics CRM or some other application, you simply go up to the data tab that's up there in the ribbon and you say, I want to analyze this particular set of data, this particular database. And I'll talk about how you can have multiple databases in your Dataverse. But this particular database, this environment, I want to analyze it in Power BI. And what that will do, that will, when you download that, or when you click that, that will download a Power BI data source file that when you double click, it will bring up that particular environment, that particular database. You authenticate, and then bam, you come up and you can see the environment URL here. We'll talk more about that in a second. But then you can have access to all the different entities or tables that are out there in the cloud. You can click on one of the entities. In this example, I clicked on account. I got a preview of some of the rows that are in there, and then do the standard, if I want to transform the data or just want to straight load the data, set up a visualization. I do a whole nother talk on intro to Power BI. So for those of you who may not be familiar with Power BI, quick intro is that it's a real low code, user-friendly, automatic visualizations. It's real friendly in that it tries to figure out the source of data, the data type of the data. It tries to figure out relationships between entities and will, recommend different visualizations based on that information. So it's a real user-friendly visualization, report building type tool, dashboard building type tool. And that's just an example of me, I had clicked on Dataverse, and you can get to it the other way too, right? Power BI does have up in its ribbon a Dataverse icon, so I could go and click there and go the opposite way. The trick is if I do it this way, then I've got to know the environment URL. And I'll show you where you can pull that up later. But so, either I find the other way, starting out in Dataverse and then coming down is a little easier to get the data into Power BI versus going to Power BI and trying to go out to Dataverse. Otherwise, you got to figure out the environment URL. All right. So again, Power Apps, click on data on the left-hand side, click on tables. You'll see different accounts. You'll see up here, there's also things like relationships, business rules, views, forms, dashboards. There's just everything that you need to manage your database is in the cloud there. You can do it from a Windows box, your Linux box, your Mac box. There's that what we call metadata, so the data about the data, right? The data type, whether it's text or number, if it's unique, whether it's required or optional, if there's any keys defined or forms defined or views defined. All that's in the cloud in one place. And then, of course, the data itself, if you click on that last tab and click on data, that brings up the actual data where you can edit, you can do all the CRUD operations, right? Create, read, update, delete. So I've got, account First Coffee, I've got McDonald's down here. If I needed to change something or add a new account, I could just click up here to add record and then, add a new entry into this particular table. So really, really makes it easy for people who know Excel. This feels really, familiar to them. In fact, there is actually an option to click under data in the ribbon and say, I want to put this in Excel, an Excel spreadsheet, this particular table, and then there's an Excel add-in that will talk back to Dataverse and not just pull the data in Excel. Most people that work with Excel are used to reading the data, but it'll actually write the data back, and we'll show you that demo in a little bit too. So why would I want to do this? Well, number one, I mentioned easy to manage, both the metadata and the data stored in the cloud together. So don't need to download anything. You can work from any of those operating systems. It also makes this easy to secure, right? It's all in one place. I have role-based security. It uses Office 365 and Azure AD accounts, so it's very easy to just group people in certain roles, reader, read writer, full control, those kind of things, and easy to kind of manage that. If you're using Dynamics 365, that's what Dataverse is using that. So very quick, easy to go and then either report on that data or work with that data. I used to work with Great Plains, and it used to be a lot harder to try to integrate with Great Plains, pull data out of that and do things with it. This makes it much easier. I mentioned the metadata. There's data types and relationships, so a rich set of metadata. There's also ability to do calculation and validation. You can create business rules, workflows. And then that productivity tools, when I talk about data, so many people when I work at the Army love Excel. They've got all their databases in Excel. So when I show them that they can work with Dataverse inside of Excel, that's what really does it for them. That's the sort of the selling factor, and we'll show you that in a minute. So a lot of good reasons why you would want to use Dataverse. Now, how would you want to use Dataverse? So one example I'd like to show is by pulling data out of Dataverse and putting it in some other data source, and I'm a big SharePoint guy. So we're going to show you how we can create an automated flow from Dataverse to SharePoint in, I want to say 3 easy steps. It's really not, I don't know if it's 3 easy steps, but it's pretty easy. There's actually a documentation, a little tutorial here in Microsoft Learn that walks us through how to do it. Basically says, hey, you initiate the flow from Dataverse, you set up a trigger, right? A flow, usually at the very simplest form, a flow is a trigger. It triggers off of some action in some data source, in this case, Dataverse. And then you have, based on that event that causes that trigger, you have an action that you can do, one or more actions. In this case, our trigger is whenever the Dataverse record is select it, create it, delete it, update it, any of those CRUD operations. For our example, we'll keep it simple. We'll just say whenever a new one's created, that'll be our trigger. And then the action is we're going to go add an item to a list in SharePoint. So that's what we're looking at. So let's do that. Let's do that demo. Let's jump out here to our window, our demo window, if I can find it. There it is. And let's bring up SharePoint. So this is my SharePoint site. I'm using a Office 365 tenant that was made available to me free from Microsoft from the Office 365 Developer Program, which is actually now called the M365 Developer Program. Microsoft loves to rename things, and I'll throw out a link to that later to show you guys how you can get your own to play with for exam prep, training, learning. It's really a great free resource. I'm a big free guy. I'll say that multiple times throughout this talk. I'm frugal, as I like to call myself. So this is my Office 365 developer tenant, and I've got a site called Project X that I created, and within that Project X I've got a list called the projects list. So the idea is that this is just a list of different projects that I might be working on, and actually I've got I think I have one for the accounts too, right? Because what I really want to do here is see whenever someone creates a new account from Dataverse, let's see it show up in this list. So I don't have the account list yet. Let's go ahead and create that. So let's just do a new list. I'm going to create an accounts list, and this is going to be, show new accounts from Dataverse. I don't know why I actually created this list. So we'll go ahead and do that. And it looks like my new list has just got a title. I'd probably need at least one more column, right? So I'll use title to store the name of the new account when someone enters a new account in Dataverse. But I'm also going to add one more, and we'll just make a single line of text. This would be like the phone number of the account, right? So maybe this list is for people that are in marketing and they need to call up the new account and make sure, hey, if you just signed up for our company, maybe that we need, if you got a savings account, maybe you need a checking account. I don't know, something like that. So we'll add phone here, and let's go ahead and save that. All right, so real simple list called accounts in my project called Project X, and we're going to store any new accounts from Dataverse in here using a flow. So let's do that. So let's bring up Flow, or Power Automate, I should say. So it's still flow.microsoft.com, which will take us to Power Automate. And then from there, you can click on My Flows, and this will show you the different flows that you've created in the past. If you want to do a new flow, we can create a new flow here. And you'll see there's also different kinds of flows: desktop flows, business process flows, flows that have been shared with me. So this is interesting. When you go and you share a flow, if you're going to collaborate with one of your coworkers, it will move. So you be careful with that. I see someone coming off mute. Someone got a question. Probably not. Didn't realize that they're on the mute, right? There we go. All right. So let's go in here and create a new flow. And you'll see there's different templates. So there you can do from a Visio, just from some other template. You can do, if you're going to do a blank, you can say, hey, this is automated cloud flow. That's the kind that we want, where it's based on some trigger and some data source. You can do instant cloud flow that's like based on pushing a button. You can schedule one based on date and time. You have a desktop flow that's sort of visual, and then the business process flow. We're going to go with automated, and we're going to go blank. I'll show you later that there's just whole resource of pre-populated templates that you really just kind of fill in the blanks. So those are kind of nice too, especially if you're doing a more complicated flow where hey, based on, someone sends me an email and I want to trigger something else. Sometimes it helps to look for a template that has most of the steps. We're just going to do a blank one for now. Keep it simple. So we'll call this the demo new accounts flow. And we're going to say, all right, what do we want this to trigger off of? Well, we said Dataverse. And when I used to do this talk, I would type Dataverse and nothing would come up. And this is where I would point out that, you actually had to used to do common, used to have to do common data, but now those are gone. So luckily it's finally caught up, and now you can actually type Dataverse. So that's good news. So we want whenever a row is added, modified, or deleted. So that's what, notice there's some legacy ones too. This is also, I used to do these with the legacy ones. So as different actions, it's like version 2 come out, they'll deprecate the old ones and mark them with legacy. They still work, but they're going to go away at some point. So we're going to go with the new one. So we'll go ahead and create that based off of that trigger. So it's saying, hey, you're going to go connect to some Dataverse, and it's looking at my current environment. I'm already logged into Office 365, so it looked at my current environment, said, oh, yep, you have one. I do need to be careful here. So I'm in my Mad SharePoint environment, but I'm developing this flow, right? I don't want to release to production just yet. So let me actually cancel out of this and go back, because what I really want to do, so let's not save this. Go back to my flows. So I'm going to discard that. I want to change this to my developer environment. So when you're first getting started, you can sign up for your own developer environment, and by default, it's going to be your name / comma space environment. And that way you can, work with your own kind of data and work with your own workflows. And then later you can export the flow and import the flow into production, sort of that, deployment life cycle. So I've switched now. Now I'm in my developer environment. You can see I did one just yesterday. I did one of these examples. So let me actually turn that one off if I can, so we don't get two flows running. I'll turn this one off too. So you can turn flows on and off. You can see I've got a bunch from previous that I had turned on and off. All right, so we're going to go create a new flow, just like I started to do. Automated cloud flow. We're going to call this new account demo. And I probably have one called that, new account demo from Dataverse. Just DV, there we go. So I don't run into one of my previous names. And again, Dataverse, we're going to look for that specific trigger. That's the trigger we want. Go ahead and create that. And now I'm in my developer environment. So my developer database, it's actually a separate database in Dataverse from my production database. And I can say, all right, which one of those CRUD operations do I want to trigger off of? And I said I'm going to keep it simple. So I'm just going to say whenever one is created. I could do any combination of those three, but I'm just going to go create. Keep it simple. The next thing it's going to know which table from Dataverse do I want to base this on? And I said account. So when someone enters a new account, and notice over here, my flow checker has already said, hey, Dave, you're not quite finished. You're working on things. And that's kind of helpful sometimes. Right now, when you just get started, you kind of ignore that because hey, I'm still working on things. Let me fill some things out. But if you don't fill everything out here, it will holler at you and tell you that, you've got issues. Looks like I filled everything out. Everything out that I needed to fill out so far. I'll pick a scope. This is if you want to limit where this would run, maybe for a specific business unit or a certain user, but I'm going to say this is for the whole organization. There's advanced options you can set. In this example, I could set different filters to, not look at all the data or run as a different user, but we're not going to do any of that. So we'll just keep that collapsed. Now that we've got our trigger fully filled out, we're going to add a step for our action. So we said we want to add a record to a SharePoint list. So we'll go ahead and type in SharePoint, and that will filter all the actions to just SharePoint actions. And so we've got some like send an HTTP request, list folder, whatever. I want to create an item, and there it is. And if I didn't scroll down and see it right away, I could have typed some additional information to just see it. There it is, create item. So I'm going to create an item in which site. So again, because I'm logged into my Office 365, it's going to go and look at the different sites that I have created. There's my project X. And then from there, it's going to list all the it's going to enumerate all the lists in that site, and I can choose which one I want to target. In this case, I said I was going to target the accounts list. Be warned that if you paused here and you went out to SharePoint and you created a whole new site or a new list, this wouldn't pick it up right away. It is a web environment, so you would have to do a refresh. You can type it in. There's a way to say enter a custom value, and that way, if you just created something and it's not showing up in the drop down, you can enter the custom value, and then you'll still be able to, even though you just created it, you won't have to refresh and kind of leave where you were. All right, so create an item. I've got my site. I've got my list. So I've got two columns, right? We saw that before, and title is actually required. So I've got to say what is the title going to be and what's the phone number going to be. This is where I can start mapping data from Dataverse into those columns that are in SharePoint. So for the title column, I'm going to say that's going to be the account name. So I'll scroll down here. Notice it comes up with dynamic content. You can also do, calculated expressions, but again, keeping it simple, we'll scroll down here and find account name. It's right at the top. So we're just going to say the account name, whatever new account name someone enters, we're going to put that in the title in SharePoint. What about the phone? There's a couple different phones in there, and sometimes you might have to do a little trial and error. Is it address phone 1? Is it phone 3? Whatever. I've already played around, and I know that the main phone is the one that's on the main form, so that's the one I want to show up here. So I'll pick the main phone. So everything looks like it's filled in. I'm going to go ahead and save that. Now, one step I skipped is no, I didn't. Sometimes I forget to name this. So if you don't like the name, there's two places you can rename it right here. So if I didn't, if I wanted maybe put some spaces in here or something just to make it look a little bit better, I can rename. This is renaming the name of my flow. Be careful because this is not auto save, right? So if I try to and then step back here, it's going to say, hey, what I did a rename and I didn't save it. So let me save that. Okay, now it's saving the rename. The other thing that you want to make sure, or the other way you could edit this, if I go back to the overview of my flow, is I could click edit here, right? So this edit is different than this edit. They got two edits and they're different. This edit is to edit the name. If I want to do, something like Dataverse. This edit is to edit the flow like we were just in. So if I actually want to add a new action or update my trigger or anything like that, I click this edit, and that brings me back into the GUI of the definition of the flow, where I make those changes. All right, so we like everything. We're going to go ahead and say, let's put this, we're ready to test. Now, when you test this, you have a couple options. If you've already run this in the past, you can say, I want to run it with a recently used, test or trigger. This is the very first time I've created this one, so I don't have that option. I can't do an automatic test. I can do a manual test where I've got to go enter a record. This is helpful. This one here is helpful where, maybe I enter a couple of records, but I don't want to enter, every time I test this, I don't have to enter new data. So the automatic is helpful. After I've got a few runs under my belt, I can reuse those runs without having to go to the GUI and enter a new account. So it's our first time, so we'll have to do manual. Let's go ahead and save that. Once that saves, we'll go back out to the overview of the flow. And now let's go to our Dataverse and enter some data. So back over to Dataverse. And we will go, where did Dataverse go? Let's just open it up again. So we'll type in flow. And then we'll click on data in the left-hand side. Which I mentioned this before, but watch this. So right now my URL says flow, right? I click on data, tables, and now it goes to Power Apps. So don't be alarmed. It's all the same. They're all in the same. Everyone's working together. I'm still in that. The one thing to do that you should be aware of, though, is what environment you're in. So I mentioned that before. So if I created a flow in my development environment, when I go to test it, I want to test it in my development environment. So that sometimes I'll forget and I'll be in one environment versus the other. And they look very similar because I loaded the same data, so it can be confusing sometimes. So make sure you're in that, your environments all match. So they do. I'm going to go in here. I'm going to click on the account table. I keep wanting to say entity because we used to call them entities. And then I'm going to go to the data tab and I'm going to enter a new account. And I think I was entering fast food. Last time I did this, it was lunchtime. So let's go ahead and add, let's see, I've got Popeyes, Taco Bell, Wendy's. What's out in the chat? Any ideas for some good fast food joints? Jollibee. So my daughter is in New York and she was eating at a place called Jollibee that has spaghetti, a fast food joint that sells spaghetti. Let's do that. So let's add Jollibee. So we'll come in here and we'll say this is Jollibee from NYC, and their number is whatever their number is. And that's really all we really need. So we'll go ahead and we'll save and close that. And that should be enough to trick In-N-Out. Oh, I love In-N-Out Burger. Yes. Now I want to go. I got to go out west for that. So I only get that when I'm out, and we haven't been out in a while. The pandemic has kept us inside, so no In-N-Out Burger for me for a long time. But yeah, okay. So let's do that one too, since you mentioned it. Let's go add In-N-Out Burger, because I cannot believe I didn't think about In-N-Out Burger when I was thinking of good places earlier. So while this is coming up, this will also give that other flow time. Sometimes the flows take a second or two to run. So while that first one is running, I'll add this another entity here, or another. I know I'm trying to type it in. It's hollering at me because I try to tab off of that. So in and out burger. I love it. And what number do they have? They got some number. That. Is it hollering at me because of my phone? Did it say not a good phone number? Did it save and close? Okay, it took that phone number. No, I don't. It looks like I don't have any rules established on format of the phone number. All right, so we should have. Let's refresh this. Notice it didn't show up. That's one thing that throws me off sometimes, depending on again, it's the web. So even though I entered two rows here, two more accounts. Let's refresh our data, and now or maybe it was there. I just wasn't looking at it. It was ordered right. There's Jollibee and In-N-Out Burger. Okay, good. So they're there. Jump over to SharePoint. And look at that, there's two records. There's Jollibee and In-N-Out Burger. So presumably our flow ran correctly. Let's go to flow and take a look. So here's our flow. Right now we don't see any, but I'm going to, again, do a refresh. And look at that, there's two succeeding runs of our flow. And if we click on the details of the run, we'll get information about what the inputs were. So this was the account. It was a new record. You can actually see the JavaScript object notation. That's what this is called, where you get those kind of attribute value pairs that are kind of squished together here, all inside the curly brackets. So you've got things like the state code. I left all this blank, so there's a lot of zeros and blanks there. So this is helpful if something goes wrong. When I was first playing around with this, and the phone number was blank, I was going through the JSON and saying, why is the phone number blank? And I realized it was main phone. I think I was trying to pull over address 1 phone, and I looked at the inputs and realized that it wasn't coming over. You can also look at the outputs. You can see what site it hit, what table, the information that came out, and again, you've kind of got some JSON for some of the more. This is system metadata that created by, so you can actually see the ID that it used to connect to the SharePoint, and some information about me from SharePoint profile, et cetera, et cetera. So a lot of good information in there. Notice here's where you can do that resubmit. That's that retesting I talk about. So if I want to, I can resubmit that test right from here, and now it's going to run it again. So I should probably have a third one. If we give this a second, yep, there. So now I reran Jollibee, so Jollibee showed up again. And if I wanted to, I could have also have gone back into here and gone to the edit and then test. Now I have the capability, because I do have a couple of triggers. I can say I want it, and I can choose which one, right? So we did that one. I just did Jollibee again. Let's run this one. This should be the In-N-Out Burger. So let's try that one again. Let that run again. And now as that's running, come back here, do a refresh. Yep, we got 4 of them. Was that In-N-Out Burger? Let's take a look and see at the inputs. Check down here. Yep, it was In-N-Out Burger. And again, if we look over at SharePoint, give this a second to update. It will update automatically, but if you're impatient like me, you can also hit F5 to refresh, and then it'll also update there too. There we go. So questions on any of that? Real straightforward. We created a flow. We connected to Dataverse. We went into Dataverse, and we just literally used the data from that, and we entered a record. As I mentioned, you don't have to use the cloud. There is Excel is everyone's favorite. So you can click on this data up in the ribbon and say, hey, I want to edit this data in Excel. This is one of my favorite tools for not just me, but for my users that are, not as tech savvy, and they want everything in, Excel is sort of the way they view the whole world. So luckily for us, they can open Excel. I can download this Excel spreadsheet and send it to them, or I can show them how to go into the cloud and get it themselves. But once they do that and they open Excel, what you'll see is that, did I click on open file? I thought I did. Yeah, it's just taking a second. The Excel file that opens, let me drag it over here from my other screen. There it is. I'll go ahead and enable it. Yes, I trust this. Is going to load a add-in for Dataverse that will do a couple of things. One, it's going to reach out to Dataverse. If it detects that I'm already logged in, it's going to use my current login. If it doesn't detect me logged in, it's going to prompt me to log in. So it looks like it did detect my login. Then it's going to access the environment and the database that I was in when I clicked the link. And then from there, it's going to bring down all the data and give me the capability to create, read, update, and delete, all 4 CRUD operations. So if you can see, it brought down all of our data, including Jollibee and In-N-Out Burger. But if I want to make changes, let me change 0th coffee to back to first coffee. Let's go and change AdventureWorks to 2021. So those are just updates. We can delete stuff. So let's delete McDonald's. Don't like McDonald's anymore. Let's do it this way. Oops. I want to delete the row. Let me do that again. Come on, there we go. Whoop. I love when the pop-up's just like, okay, it's just not going to, there we go, delete. Delete McDonald's, and then if we want to add one, let's see if we can add one. Let's add, so another one, I had Dunkin' Donuts, what else? In-N-Out Burger. Oh gosh, I'm trying to think. There was a place in Vegas, I don't think it's there anymore, but it was called Bocce Burger. And it was fantastic. Now you got me thinking about burgers. Bocce Burger was just absolutely fantastic. All right, so let's go ahead and publish those and see if those publish. So notice it read through what I've done so far, and it says, hey, you added a row, you updated 2 rows, and you deleted 1 row. Should I push all that to Dataverse? And I'll say, yes, please do that. And it's going to go out there and sync all those changes with Dataverse. And now if I jump out to Dataverse and look at my data, again, we'll do a refresh. I should have those changes. So we got First Coffee now. We got VentureWorks 2021. We got Bocce Burger. Where's Bocce? Bocce Burger. And McDonald's is gone. All poor McDonald's. So using Excel is just that easy. Again, I went up to that ribbon. I edited the data in Excel. Now remember, it is using that specific environment. If I switch environments here, I should point this out. It's going to switch databases on me. Each environment has its own database. So this is now my what's known as my default environment. And if in my default environment, you know, it's got its own Dataverse. So if I click on data and go to tables, you'll see that it's got its own set of accounts. It might not have all the same. This is all standard, so I don't have any custom entities in this particular one. But if I click on account and data, it's a different set of data, right? This one is actually, so in the previous one, I loaded a bunch of sample Microsoft data as part of the whole Microsoft Power Platform community plan. You can load sample data, and I'll talk about how to sign up for that free community plan. But this one didn't have any sample data, so I just started typing data in. So you don't see McDonald's, you don't see any of that stuff. You just have whatever I typed in when I was doing demos with my default environment. So you can have a default environment, you can have a development environment, you can even have a sandbox, a trial, production, and we'll talk a little about that in a second. What else did we want to talk about? Let's look at our wrap up, see what I missed. So I showed you how to create a flow. We went in and we reviewed the existing entities or tables in Dataverse. I should update that. We added a new record. We ran the flow. We saw the results in SharePoint. We looked at the flow results, looked at the JSON of those flows. Let's export and import a flow. And then we'll also create a custom entity in Dataverse to show you how you do that. And we already did this last one. We showed you how we opened it up in Excel and pushed the data back. So these are the two I need to do. Let's look at exporting and importing a flow if I wanted to move it from one environment to another. And then we'll also show you how to create your own custom entity. So back into Dataverse. So if I wanted to create my own entity here, and again, let me switch back to my development environment. And I said, you know what? I've got tables, and looks. I'll bet you I already have pet in here. Let's scroll down here and see. I've got account. Yeah, I've got cat. I've got dogs. So let's add one for fish. Do I have? No, I already got fish. Let's add snakes, right? So let's add a new table for snakes. So maybe I'm keeping track of my different snakes, right? So we'll come here and say this is my snakes table, right? I like how if I type snake, it'll actually have a plural display name. So that's kind of cool. It gives the prefix is what identifies this as custom, right? When you'll see the standard prefixes all are just account, activity pointer, but my custom ones have a custom prefix. Display, this is different columns, so this is the primary field, if you will. It's going to be the unique name. I can choose whether or not I want to allow them to upload binary large objects or attachments. There's other settings I can set, like descriptions and other things, but we'll keep it simple. I'll go ahead and create this. And now from there, I can go in there and do things like set up different relationships, add different keys, or additional columns. So let's add some columns, right? So in my snake, now look, I had one column, but once I clicked off and clicked back onto it, you'll see there's a bunch of system metadata, right? Things like created by, created on, sequence number, modified by. So that's all system metadata. So if I want to add my own columns, right now we had, maybe there's a date of birth, right, when my snake was born. So that's not going to be text, that's going to be a date. If I know maybe a date and time, maybe date only, I can make this optional, required, recommended. We'll leave it optional, whether I want it to be searchable or not. Let's go ahead and add that. What else? Maybe an owner, so whoever owns the snake. So let's add another one. We'll go say this is the owner of the snake. What is this going to be? Maybe this is a customer, right? So it doesn't have to be, in this case, I'm saying the data type is another entity or another table. So this is a customer that might own the snake, and we can add that as well. So you can see there's a whole bunch. For those database administrators, database designers out there, it's just, very much like SQL Server or SQL Server Management Studio, where you're into your table and you're designing your table, and you're working with your existing table structures. You're making modifications, you're making additions like that. Very graphical user interface. What would be nice? I haven't seen it yet, but it would be nice if I could kind of script this and say generate the SQL, generate the script. but they didn't, right now it's all very easy to come in here and go into the data and make your changes through the GUI. All right, so that's custom entities or tables. Let's go back to our flows and talk about how we would move our flows back and forth. So let's click on flows. Oh, I didn't save my changes. Well, let's save my changes, please. Save table, there we go. So again, depending where you are in the whole Office 365 world, some things automatically save. In this case, make sure you hit save or your changes won't be saved. All right, so now I've created that new snake. It's out there. People can do stuff with it. Let's go back to flows. Now, this is an interesting thing, and another one of those gotchas to watch out for is there's a couple different ways to get to your flows, and one of those ways won't let you import export, and one of them will. So I believe this is the one that won't. When I click on flows from Power Apps, I say, hey, there's that new account demo. I want to export that so someone else can import it. So I click on here and I'm looking for export and I don't see it. And I say, Dave lied to me. He told me we could export. He told me we could import, but maybe I don't have permissions. I don't know what's going on. And now I start tweeting at Dave, you're a liar. You said you could import export, but I can't. And you send the screenshot. Well, that's just because of this particular view, right? So let's go back to Flow, Power Automate, and click on My Flows. And that is where we can import and export our flows. I don't know why one's limited and one's not, but there are two different ways to get to the same set of flows. But when you go to My Flows under Power Automate, now I can come in here and I can do things like export. So I'm going to export this flow as a zip file so I can email it to somebody, whatever I want to do with it. Once I export it, you have to specify certain things like, when someone imports it, what information are they going to have to update? Are they going to overwrite? Are they going to update? They're going to create the connections new, things like that. So here's where it's coming in and saying, all right, let's set up your export package. What are the package details? Give it a name. We'll call this account notifications. What, environment, description, and this is all optional if I want to put that in there. Down here, you can say, review package content. Choose your export options and add comments to provide instruction or version notes to whoever's going to be importing this. So this is the new account demo Dataverse. It's a flow. During the import, is it going to create as new or is it going to update? Whatever you want to do, we'll say create as new. Then down here, you can say there's two connections that this flow was defined with. Both of them used my credentials. I'm going to let, when people select them, there's really only one choice. They're going to have to pick their own connection. So it's not going to reuse my ID. That wouldn't be good, right? If I'm giving this to someone else, they got to go pick their own connection information. So we'll have to make them select that when they import this particular flow. So let's go ahead and export that. And that's just going to create this zip file that someone now can download. So let's go ahead and download that. And there it is. So we'll open that up in our Explorer. And there's that zip file. So now let's go import it. So I'm going to switch my environment to my MAD SharePoint environment. I could log into a whole nother tenant if I wanted to, but I'll keep it simple here. And now we're going to import. So we're going to say, hey, I'm in production now, and I'm going to import some flow that someone created for me. So I'm changing hats here, I'm the DevOps person. I'm the ops person in DevOps. And I'm going to go upload and go grab that file that they gave me. And I'm going to pull in that from downloads, that accounts notification file. And you'll see here now that it's pulling it in, it's going to come up with those parameters that I specified they had to update and ask me for information for those. What connection do I want to use? What environment do I want to use? That kind of thing. So it's coming through here and it says, all right, I'm going to create this as new. That's going to be the name. Sounds good. What am I going to, what connection am I going to use? Well, I've got one here that's available. If I didn't have one, I could create a new one, but we'll go ahead and use that. And same thing down here, I'm going to use my existing connection. So that all looks good. Let's go ahead and import that. So now it's taking that flow that I developed in my developer environment and importing it into my production, or in this case, my default environment. I say default versus production because they're slightly different. Default is the environment that's used sort of by SharePoint and some other things, unless you specify something differently. So we worked with SharePoint earlier where we said that, hey, use the developer environment. But if I were to go into SharePoint, so if I went, while this is importing, I'll show you real quick. If I go into SharePoint and I wanted to just automate from here and I created, or not automate, excuse me, if I wanted to create a Power Automate, which, by the way, another quick, hey, what the heck's going on? They moved create a flow used to be under automate. And just recently they said, nah, let's move it to under integrate. So if you're looking for, it used to be here, but it's not anymore. Now it's here. So just, yay, Microsoft. So integrate, power automate, create a flow. If I do this here, it's not going to use my default, or it's not going to use my developer environment. When you create a flow from within SharePoint, and I pick one of these templates. I remember I told you about the templates earlier. This is going to use my default environment, that bad SharePoint environment, which had in parentheses default. So be aware of that. That's what that default environment is for when people are like working in SharePoint. It's just the default environment. And as I mentioned, there's all sorts. I started to talk about some of these templates I didn't show you, but these are some of those templates. So sending a customized email, starting an approval, requesting manager approval. There's more than just that. There's just a ton of them. These are all specifically SharePoint related ones. And then there's even more, if I click on see more templates, you'll see the whole world of templates that are out there. Flow really is geared to work with all sorts of different data sources. So again, this one is filtered for SharePoint. You can see how many there are. But if I take SharePoint out of there, oh my gosh, there's just so many flows for working with all sorts of data sources. It looks like we got Outlook and Dropbox and Gmail, and it's pretty crazy. All right, so while we did that, I was hoping the import would finish. Let's see if it did. Yes, all package resources were successfully inputted. The flow has been created successfully. We can now open it and see it in our default environment, and run it just like we did in our development environment. We can open it up, look at the different settings and other information about that. Right? If we test it, it's brand new, so I can't do it automatically, right? In fact, it's disabled. I got to enable it because I just imported it, so I do have to turn it on first, right? That's what we did earlier. I had some old ones that I turned off, so if I want to, I could come in here and turn this on. Then I could go in there and start testing. Now this is crying at me. What's it saying? I do have a service plan. So my default one, I did not sign up. It's a non-standard, so yeah, that's why it's hollering at me. So there are, and we'll talk a little bit about licensing near the end here. There are some issues with, development environment's nice because you sort of can do anything, almost anything. But when you get into a real production or default environment where licensing is it counts, you have to deal with these kind of things. So, all right. Let's jump back out here. So I think we covered everything. We got our new flow, our entities. We ran it, saw the results, import, export, even created some custom ones and played with Excel. I mentioned trial environments. So you can create two types, right? You can do trial or production. There is an admin center where you can go and I'll show you some examples of that in a minute, where you can see, hey, this is my trial environment, lasts for a few days. If it's one, you can actually convert a trial to a production environment. Hey, you've tried it, you've liked it, you want to convert it. There's that opportunity to just switch it to a production environment. If you want to get started and you want to play around, especially if you're like getting ready for an exam, the Power Apps Community Plan is free for individual use to play around with. You can do Power Apps, you can do Flow, you can do Dataverse, all that good stuff for free. So sign up for that. It doesn't cost anything. I've been using it for a while now. As I mentioned, it includes Power Apps, Flow, Dataverse, data connectors. The few things it doesn't, like a business data flow. For some reason, there's a few premium things in there that you can't access, and that's one of them. So it's almost everything. If you use Dynamics, there's a Dynamics 365 admin center that you can go to where you can see different types of environments you can create for Dataverse. So in this example, I thought this was a nice screenshot that showed me I have a production environment, a developer environment, a trial environment. The only thing that's missing from here is a sandbox environment. So those are some of the different environments that you can create. When you go into your admin center, whether it's the Dynamics CRM or even in Power Platform, it's also its own admin center. You go into that admin center and you can say, hey, I want to create an environment. That's where you get to choose the type: sandbox, production, trial. You can't create a developer environment. A developer has to sign up for a developer environment. So you don't create one from here, but when your developers sign up for a development environment, that's when that gets created. But these three are the ones that you can create from the admin center. When you walk through creating, there's one more gotcha I'll talk about. So I think I've mentioned all these tips and tricks already. Is just watch out for the terms. If you're used to be looking for CDS, now it's Dataverse. Check, use that flow checker to see if you're missing any settings. It'll have that red ball we saw earlier, And if you share a flow, I didn't show you this, but if I jump back out to flow for a second, when you go and you share a flow, so if I'm in here and I say, hey, I want to share this, and I share it with another person in my company, right? So suppose I share this with my daughter, Sarah, out there somewhere in mad SharePoint land. It will no longer be under my flows, and that sometimes throws me for a loop. So I'll go under my flows. It is under my flows, but it's under shared with me, you know. So be careful that, you know, if you're looking for a flow here and you shared it with someone, it might be under there instead. So just one of those gotchas. What else? Building an automated flow. Though this was, you know, like I said, if you're looking for common data, you have to look for Dataverse. When you set up your first, whether it's development environment or any new environment, it is a web environment. It does take a while to provision. So in this example, I created a new environment called Tech Girls. I do a lot of volunteer work with an organization, a great organization called TechGirls.org, where we teach young women how to do stuff in STEM and get them excited about STEM. In this particular example, I created it. When you first sign up, there's no environment, right? So I signed up for a new developer plan. And it says I had to click create the environment. No big deal. I started a 30-day trial. I did that. I used the Power Apps community plan, log in, pick my state. Then it says create your database. This is the database inside a Dataverse. So as you're getting started, you're creating your environment, then you create your database. When you create your database, it's going to ask you for things like which currency, what language, whether or not you want to include those samples, apps, and datas. I highly recommend this. This gives you so that you don't have that white blank slate problem, right, where there's nothing there. If you include sample apps and data, you'll get a bunch of, you know, accounts and addresses and stuff to play with. So I think that's really helpful to make sure you check that off and create your database. So that will take a second. You may, if you're like me and impatient, you may get this. Don't worry. You know, I don't know how many times my users call me up and they say, hey, something went wrong. And I'll say, did you try it again? Did you hit refresh? Did you reboot? 9 times out of 10, that's the answer. And of course, in this situation, when you go first create your database, you just wait a few seconds, hit refresh, bam, it will be provisioned. It's the cloud. It will take a few minutes. So be aware of that. Once it's provisioned, again, this is all that sample data. You can play with all that information just like we were doing earlier. All right. I mentioned licensing and license management. This is not my forte, so I put it up here so you guys can have the link when you download my slides. All the links are built into the slides themselves, so you can click on this. You can learn all about when you have to pay, when you don't have to pay, what's included in a regular Office 365 plan, what's not included in Office 365 plan. So lots of different information about licensing and trial plans and standalone plans, and I mentioned what's included in 365. And I feel like it changes. You know, it has changed. There's been some changes not too long ago. So, you know, definitely check out this resource for if you have specific questions about when you can use what and where and how that works. This is me, you know, saying speak no evil, see no evil, hear no evil about licensing. The other thing I want to mention is the Office 365 Developer Plan, which is another great resource. So if you want to work with Dataverse and you want to work with you know, say like SharePoint or something like that, or Outlook Online, you know, this resource is free in that you can go out there. In fact, if I jump out here and show you this, so we'll go look for Office 365 Dev. It's called M365. So, you know, just to kind of show that it belongs to the whole universe of Office 365 and more now. But a great resource, free. You get that developer sandbox, 90-day, every 90 days, as long as you're using it, Microsoft automatically renews it. Every 90 days, I get an email from Microsoft saying, congratulations, you're using your sandbox. We're going to renew it. I've had this for 5 years now. So they just keep renewing it as long as I keep using it. Now, I've had some others where I did it for like, you know, to play with something and then I forgot about it. And then they deprovisioned it and it went away. But if you know, Mad SharePoint, Tech Girls, if you're using them all the time, they will keep renewing them. Again, you can have the sample data pack, so that's really nice. You load that with that sample data, gives you something to work with, not a blank intranet, but an intranet full of data, test users, test data, all that other stuff. So really, really a great program. Doesn't cost you anything. I'll log into mine just to show you some details about mine. It just, you know, you can't, they say you get what you pay for, but in this case, you get so much more than what you pay for since you don't pay for anything. It's just a fabulous resource to sign up for. Oh, it's just, it's like, oh, you really? Yes, I'm logged in. This is the one, not the one nitpicky thing. This is sometimes nitpicky where I play around with different tenants. I log into this tenant, I log into that tenant, and sometimes you get in these like weird of, it's like doesn't know who I am. It's like, yes, I said manage SharePoint, and now it's what doing sort of a round robin. Are you sure you're in the manage SharePoint? Yes, I am. Okay, well, we'll let that thing figure itself out. But anyway, check out the M365 Developer Program. Again, free resource, a great resource. With that, I'll wrap up. We got a few minutes for questions if anyone has any questions. Feel free to tweet me at David E. Patrick on Twitter if you think of questions after the fact. I know a lot of times, especially when I teach class at University of Maryland, I'll talk for an hour. People's minds are just going, oh my gosh, you threw so much information at me. Can't even think to come up with questions. And, 5 minutes later, a day later, a week later, they come up with questions. So, tweet me. I love getting your tweets. I love especially the weird questions that I have to kind of go research and come up with an answer. I think that's really cool. The other thing, I see a bunch of questions out in the chat, so we'll grab them in a second. I've got a new video blog out, so patrickperspective.com. Check that out, please. My daughter's she's an intern at Amazon of all places, but she does a lot of Microsoft stuff. And she and I have just put together, let me show you that real quick. If you go to patrickperspective.com, you'll see that we have a new video blog on YouTube out there where we talk about anything and everything. So it's all software engineering, databases, that kind of thing. We talk about using Teams and being stuck in the lobby, working with tech girls and teaching STEM topics, just kind of, tech in general and some of the trials and tribulations of being in tech. So we release a video every couple of weeks. We've got 3 out so far. We'd love for you to come in and check it out and hear your thoughts. And we're always asking, and we give away prizes too. We have a Patrick Prize Patrol that we have every episode where we're asking for your input and we're giving away prizes based on that feedback. So really appreciate you guys checking that out and giving us some feedback. So questions, let's see what we had over here. How do we determine if we should go with Azure SQL or Dataverse? Wow, that's a great question. Dataverse, usually, if you're already using it, if you're using Dynamics 365, you're using Dataverse. So that's a big, ding, 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 ding. I'm already using Dataverse. I'm a big fan of what do I have? What's already in my toolbox? I don't want to reach for something if I don't, so I was a database administrator for about 10 years, database developer for 30 years. And whenever I walked into a client, if they were using Oracle, they would say, well, should we switch to SQL? And I was like, well, I don't know. Let's think about this. If you're using Oracle already, if it's not broke, if you're using, if you've got Oracle developers on staff, are you going to, retrain them? So, I wouldn't reach for Dataverse unless you already have, unless there's already a reason for Dataverse. Same thing with Azure SQL. A lot of times when I'm working with data, my main data source is SharePoint. I've got a lot of data in SharePoint. But then there, sometimes something will say data. SharePoint's great for a small amount of data. When you start to get these large data sets or complicated data sets, then I'm reaching for SQL Server. That's sort of my tried and true. And I'll do on premises if it's already set up in there for me. If it's people have concerns about startup costs and they want to they sort of want that availability of being in the cloud and they don't mind that subscription cost, then I'll reach for the cloud SQL Server. So really, it's a typical consultant's response. It depends. You really have to look at a bunch of different requirements, and that would drive whether you're going to choose Azure SQL, Dataverse, SQL Server on premises, Access databases. I'm still a big fan of Microsoft Access, Share, whatever data source you're going to use. Second question, is there any backup or restore? Yes, there is. I didn't show you that, but there is backup and restore in Dataverse. How do you know how much we are? Yeah, that's that licensing link I sent that to you. So check out the licensing. There is a lot of different monitors in Azure and Office 365 to see what's being charged where and what resources are responsible for those charges. I feel like it's a whole nother talk and definitely not one that I would like to give. That kind of makes my head go, oh my gosh. But there are calculators and monitors out there to measure what resources are charging you and how much they're costing. If we have multiple environments, does the cost double, triple? In short, yes, right? One of well, not exactly, I shouldn't say yes, but it's definitely going to be more, right? So I don't know the exact how it would work out. And I do a lot of my looking at costs, probably not the best way to do it, but from trial and error, where we start working with stuff in a trial and then we measure how much that did. So I'll give you an example. We use Azure. We put SharePoint on Azure, so it's SharePoint on premises in Azure, and then we let that run in a trial period for 90 days. But then we measure how much the size of that SharePoint is and all that. So we were able to see how much it would have cost. Then when we go into production, we have a real good feel because we used it, for real for 90 days, and we saw what it would have cost, that kind of thing. If the business analyst wants to work with the PBI dataset, can we give them access to import into Dataverse and create their own? Yes, it's all role-based security, so you can give them that access. And we're coming up with one last minute. I think I got through most of the questions in the chat. Is there anything else out there? Any last minute questions or chats? Going once, going twice? Sold. Thank you, guys. Thanks everyone for paying attention. Hopefully you got a nugget or two out of this. Again, if you think of questions afterwards, tweet me at David Patrick. Check out my video blog at Patrick Perspective. And if you're looking for a job, go to tinyurl.com/DSA job. We'd love to have you. Thanks again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very much, David. Great presentation. Thanks.